Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Monday, March 19th, 2018. We're here for the purpose of the regular meeting of the Elmhurst City Council. I'm going to ask the young gentleman from Field School, Cub Scout Pack 26, to lead us in the pledge. Please rise. Come on, guys. Come up here. Patrick, Kieran, Nick, Armando. What was your name? What? Thomas. Boy, you think I'd get that one. Anyway, these young gentlemen are going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Patrick, are you ready? Armando, you good to go? All right, lead us off, gentlemen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great job, guys. Hey, Armando. Tell your grandfather that this is his best friend's gavel, okay? All right. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Clerk Spencer, I ask that you call the roll.
Polumsky.
Aye.
Bram.
Aye.
Here.
Toledo.
Here.
Here.
York.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Park.
Here.
Honquist.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
Brennan.
Here.
Sabatino. Absent. Deuter.
Here.
Dunn. Absent. Leader.
Here.
12 present, 2 absent.
12 present, 2 absent. We have a quorum. On to agenda item 2.1. I have a proclamation. Is I saw Rob Wagner here. Is Kristen Barron here? Kristen, I'd ask you to meet me over at the dais. Thank you. How you doing? This is your assistant coach. What's your name? Alyssa. How many groups do we have? How many we got? 5? Come on up. Oh, you got to come up then. Come on. All the girls, come on. Everyone, managers and everyone. I'm going to turn it over to you.
I was wondering where they were.
We're going to be here for a while. Absolutely. You kidding me?
I would love to.
Put my yes
Politician in
votes
the
in now and
making.
leave.
Not turning down a microphone. Okay. As
Say you.
most people in the audience know, and certainly elected officials know, that whenever we have, whenever our young folks in town do such a wonderful job and actually win state, we love to bring them to council to have them recognized for their hard work and thank them for their representation of the city of Elmhurst. So I have a proclamation here. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but some of it, and then I'm going to ask Coach to say a few words and the assistant coach. Whereas the York varsity dance team capped off their 2018 season by taking first place at the IHSA state finals in the Division 3A, bringing home their first state championship win, whereas the York varsity dance team's determination and drive to be the best they can be while practicing at least 12 hours a week on their routine and becoming role models for future athletes in our community have been a great source of pride for the entire Elmhurst community. Whereas the York varsity dance team is just one example of the many valuable organizations for Elmhurst youth that continue to benefit the city in the fashion that is meaningful, healthy, and worthy of acknowledgement in this special year. Now, therefore, I, Steve Morley, Mayor of the City of Elmhurst, with great pride congratulate the 2018 York varsity dance team on their earning first place in the 2018 IHSA State Finals, proclaiming March 19th, 2018 as York Varsity Dance Team Day. Let's congratulate them. So I'm going to ask your coaches, Coach Kristen Barron and Ms. Ortiz, Alyssa Ortiz are going to say a few words on behalf of the team. And then, ladies, we'll take a picture up here, and I know that the council would like to personally congratulate you. So first, Coach Barron. There you go. Thank you.
All right, welcome. Just as he had mentioned, these are state championship dancers in 2018. Not all of our team can be here because they are dancing tonight. So for today, we have Sophie, just raise your hand when I say your name, and Nina, Bella, Haley, Allie, and Michaela, and Coach Ortiz. So this, yes, congratulations. I've been coaching this team for 3 years and 2 years with Coach Ortiz, and she was a huge part of us taking this championship home. She has coached the JV level, and they were really successful these past 2 years, and then brought her talents over to our varsity level. And 3 years ago, we took 11th at state. Last year, we took 6th place at state. And this year, our goal was top 3 at state, and they came home with 1st. They actually got the highest score out of any high school in the actual state, any division. So people are really going to be after us next year. But thank you so much for recognizing them, and thank you for all the dancers and their parents' support, Coach Ortiz and Rob Wagner. Thank you so much.
We're going to do a picture. Try to get by here. You guys are probably more than here. Come on, everybody.
Shoes in the pants.
Face the audience. Rob, you want to be in the picture? No thanks. All right, now before we let you go, I know that all of the folks up on that one first. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah. I'm in duty.
Start over here, Alderman Walter, and then all the way around here, and you're gonna watch yourself as you come on out, okay? All right.
Enjoy.
Good job. Congratulations. Thank you. Good job. Thank you for being here. Congratulations. Congratulations. Good luck in the next competition. Congratulations.
Well done.
Congratulations. Great job. Thank you for being here. Congratulations.
Oh, what fun for you. He's probably got to do like handstands.
Yeah. Coach taught him how to shake hands.
Watch your step.
Congratulations.
Watch your step.
They came up here.
Careful. Okay.
One more time.
That's pretty good. State champion.
Has a nice ring to it, huh?
Okay, on to agenda item 3, receipt of written communication from the public. At this time, is there anyone in the audience? Sorry, I'm speaking to the microphone. On to agenda item 3, receipt of written communication from the public. At this time, is there anyone in the audience who has any written communication they wish to submit? Please raise your hand. We've got 2. Come on up and please give whatever you have to give. 3, whatever you have to give to Clerk Spencer.
Okay, yeah, I saw that. Oh, okay. All right, you can do that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, anyone else for written wishing to submit written communications from the public? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll go on to public forum, agenda item 4. This is an opportunity for anybody in our audience to address the council and specifically the chairman and on any item they so choose. We had a sign-up sheet in the back of our room. When your name is called, we ask that you make your way to the microphone over to my right, your left, next to Chief Ruth over there. When you get started, we ask that you state your name. We are recording this. Your address is optional. Out of respect for work that we need to get done here this evening and for others that may want to speak, we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. If you go over your 3 minutes, I will give you a gentle reminder and ask for you to wrap up your comments. Pardon me. Clerk Spencer, at this time, Is there anybody who signed up for public forum?
Yes, Mayor. I'll start with Ben Silver, 182 North York, Citizen Advocacy Center.
Excuse me. Oh, Chief Freeman's got it. We got to keep that door open. Ben, the floor is yours.
Good evening. My name is Ben Silver, and I am a community lawyer with the Citizen Advocacy Center at 182 North York. Tonight, you have before you a report on a conditional use application on Fremont Avenue. This application twice failed before the Zoning and Planning Commission, and the Development Planning and Zoning Committee submitted a unanimous report against the application once before. Since then, the building's orientation shifted 90 degrees, but the size of its footprint is nearly identical. The DPZ's change of heart, then, does not appear to come from a difference in the application, but rather as a response to a legal threat from the applicant. What does not come across in the report you're reading tonight is that the Development Planning and Zoning Committee discussed and incorrectly relied upon a case from Chicago Heights to say that evidence that conditional use standards have not been met must be, quote, overwhelming. That is not what the Chicago Heights case says. It is not a reflection of any law in this state. I've just provided copies of that case for those of you who don't have it with the relevant passage highlighted. That case said Chicago Heights could not deny a use where it did not meet the city's comprehensive plan because Chicago Heights did not include conformity with its comprehensive plan as a standard for conditional use. Elmhurst does include conformity with the comprehensive plan as one of 7 standards. The case the committee relied on specifically says that is legally valid. The DPZ tries to further ignore this problem in its report by stating that this conditional use meets the comprehensive plan by claiming that any use, whether permitted or conditional, allowed in R2 is in compliance with the comprehensive plan. Think about the implications of that. Of course, that's not what the comprehensive plan says. The comprehensive plan calls specifically for single-family residential on Fremont Avenue. The only buildings on this stretch of street that do not match that description are non-conforming 2 and 3 flats that look like single-family homes and predate Elmhurst's current zoning scheme. Remarkably, the DPZ said it doesn't have to follow the comprehensive plan. 2 committee members said that. They said it's not the law, yet it's a codified standard in the Elmhurst ordinances for conditional use. Quote, no conditional use shall be recommended by the Zoning and Planning Commission unless they shall find that the proposed conditional use is not contrary to the objectives of the current comprehensive plan for the city, 22.26H. The DPZ also dismissed diminished property value as a possible standard. They noted that experts don't really matter because both sides can bring in experts. As an attorney, I was gravely discouraged by the committee's dismissal of expert testimony. Judges, juries, arbitrators, and administrators across the country at every level of government weigh expert testimony each and every day. It is an integral part of our administrative and judicial processes. While experts disagree, it is the tribunal's job to weigh the credentials, arguments, and evidence of experts. In this case, only one side offered expert testimony as to the effect on property values. It is the duty of the DPZ and the City Council to weigh that evidence. The Zoning and Planning Commission didn't recommend approval of this case because 4 of them found that the nursing home would substantially diminish property values and that the building did not comply with the comprehensive plan. The Development Planning and Zoning Committee ignored those standards. Now it's up to the City Council to decide. Do your ordinances mean anything? Can residents of Elmhurst rely on the municipal code to protect their investments? Will you respect your constituents? Or will you cave in the face of a legal threat? Thank you.
J. McNichols, 185 Fremont. McNichols?
He's coming.
Oh. Thank you.
Jay McNichols, 185 East Fremont Avenue. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and thank you to all my neighbors for all their support, and to Ben Silver. I passed out some of my copies of my letter for all of you, so you can follow along if you care to. 17P02 is not a new case. As Mr. Silver mentioned, it was voted down by the commission twice, and 1 report was written by the committee, committee that also rejected the application initially. So I ask you, how is it that it can be rejected 3 times and then remanded to the commission, given a new case? But if nothing substantial has changed, then it's the same case. But yet it was approved. So the logic doesn't seem to follow. If it's substantially changed, should have been a new case. Not substantially changed, same case, and the report should have been handed up. So I wanted to point that out. Again, it was remanded under threat of a lawsuit, as you can see the quote from Alderman Honquist from the Chicago Tribune in August of last year. City Code 2226K1 states that planned development conditional use is a privilege to be earned and not a right which can be claimed. And the Commission shall recommend this, and the City Council shall grant only such increase of latitude which is consistent with the benefit accruing the city. And as a condition for approval, each planned development must be generally compatible with the character and objectives of the zoning districts within which it's located. Alderman Toledo stated at the deliberations on February 12th that conditional use should be assumed that it's permitted and then we have to deny it. So we have to assume that based on our code that it's permitted. The code says quite the opposite, in fact. It says that it is a privilege to be granted and that the standards must be met. You don't start with approval and then start trying to deny it. You start with the burden of proof on the applicant and then you apply the standards and the evidence that's presented to you. Next, Standard H, as Mr. Silver mentioned. Conditional use shall not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the neighborhood, nor shall substantially diminish and impair property values within the neighborhood. I submitted to this, to the Commission back in December of 2016, a zoning report, a report to the Zoning Commission that was an appraisal report. Mark Stapleton came to the Commission, raised his hand, swore in, gave his testimony that property values would go down due to external obsolescence. That report is included in the packet that I handed to you tonight. It's also on the record. He claims that due to external obsolescence, based on his expert opinion as an appraiser for over 30 years, licensed by the state of Illinois, that my property and others adjacent to this planned expansion will decrease by about 4%. That's substantial. However, the applicant never brought an expert to testify. They did submit a letter in December of 2016, but that letter was never brought into evidence by the expert. He never came to the Commission, never raised his hand, never swore in, was never made available for cross-examination, and never established his credentials. The city's own attorney, in an email exchange between me and Than Werner, is also excerpted in my letter, and it says essentially that private citizen testimony, when they're not present to be sworn in and cross-examined, should be given no weight, that it doesn't have probative value. So in this case, even though Alderman Toledo and Alderman Molnar deliberated and said that, well, it's he said, she said on property values, and they also said, you can bring your expert, I can bring my expert. That's in the transcripts from February. Even though they said that, it's actually not true because the applicant never brought an expert to testify. Even if you do consider the testimony in that letter.
Mr. McNichol, I'd ask you to wrap up your comments, please.
Okay, just one more. The last comment I have is about the comprehensive plan of the city of Elmhurst. As Mr. Silver mentioned, it is the law. It is the code for the municipal code that you have to consider the compatibility with the Elmhurst comprehensive plan. And East Fremont Avenue is designated for single-family development in the comprehensive plan of the city of Elmhurst. It is clear, and that is the law, so they do not meet that standard. Based on the facts and the evidence, based on the standards, I strongly urge you to reject the application for conditional use to protect the character of the neighborhoods of the city of Elmhurst. Thank you very much for your time and your careful consideration.
Eileen Oser.
Hope I get this right tonight. My name's Eileen Oser, and I'm a resident on East Fremont Street. And I want to say that the residents of Fremont have exercised their legislative rights to participate in the legislative process and the approval of Elmhurst Extended Care. We have taken great care to look at the standards and provide evidence to show how Elmhurst Extended Care did not, in fact, meet the standards that the city of Elmhurst has imposed. We've clearly shown that the overall character of East Fremont is a single family residential, The comprehensive plan clearly shows future land use on East Fremont as single-family homes, not institutional or multifamily. Elmhurst residents have 4 nursing homes to choose from for post-acute and long-term care. There is an excess of beds in this planning area per the state. The immediate area is undergoing rapid redevelopment, and the properties on East Fremont could be improved with 3 single-family homes. EECC chose to demolish the existing homes and left the land vacant. In addition, the introduction of a structure on the scale proposed by EECC would alter, if not destroy, the predominantly residential quality of the neighborhood. There is clearly a boundary line between East Fremont and East Lake Street, evidenced by the zoning districts applied by the city and the density usage. And their statement that they are adjacent to us is simply not true according to your own city ordinance. Sharing a backyard boundary is not the same as adjacent. EECC purchased the properties on East Fremont knowing that they were zoned R2 single-family residential. In terms of the decision made by the DPZ to consider this as a permissive use, I believe that was on an incorrect interpretation that they were given by the attorney. If you look at the Living Word case, to interpret a conditional use as permissive is to interpret it as an administrative action. Subsequent case law has shown and reaffirmed that a conditional use application can be considered a legislative action, and as a legislative action, the burden of proof is on the applicant, not on the city. We have provided legal we had a legal expert, Michael Roth, who I think you all know, who provided testimony at the hearing. We provide a letter that documents specifically how, since 2006, the city should be applying, it has to do with your municipal code. And we believe as residents that you have a responsibility to follow that residential code in the approval of this, to deny this application. Furthermore, we don't think it should be that the city should take the position that if any applicant threatens to sue them, they will simply fold. Elmhurst Extended Care never provided any evidence other than the fact that they were building according to the code, that they indeed met the standards for conditional use. Their whole basis of their case was that if you don't approve this, we will threaten you with a federal lawsuit alleging that you have violated the Federal Housing Authority. So I encourage you to think about future land use cases in Elmhurst. You will set a precedent. You will change your interpretation from legislative to actually administrative. You will be unable to effectively deny any conditional use application if you take that standard. Thank you.
Teresa McCarthy.
Hi, my name's Teresa McCarthy. I live on Fremont. What I'd like to do is take a second. I know a lot of my neighbors will not speak, but I'd like anybody that...
Ms. McCarthy, you actually have to address your comments to the chair.
Can I ask my neighbors to stand if they disagree with me?
It's not appropriate to engage with the audience. Please direct your comments to the
Well,
chair.
I'd like to respond then to a letter by James Grabowski, the city manager. There was a flyer that went out around the St. Patrick's Day Parade. And his response about this project was, no scale limits, no size limits, no density limits. They were all being met by code. But it's all in relation to the neighborhood. A normal R2 is a 50-foot minimum. On Fremont Street, the average lot size is 50 to 60 feet. This property will now be 180 feet. No scale limits. The average house on Fremont Street will be, it's 2,500 square feet. The largest is 4,200 square feet. The building that'll be put between houses on Fremont will be 18,000 square feet. The tallest home on Fremont is 28 feet. This building will be 35 feet. So I really think it's hard to say there's no scale, no size limits, no density limits that are similar to what's on Fremont. I disagree. The other thing is, it was said the Zoning and Planning Commission found that no clear evidence was presented to indicate that property values would be substantially diminished. That's not true. No consensus was reached. It wasn't found, and they ignored our testimony. Again, I feel very strongly that the residents of Elmhurst need to know this. This will set a precedent that will change how you view land use throughout for Elmhurst if this occurs on Fremont. Thank you.
Mary Young, 167 East Fremont.
Hi, good evening. I'm Mary Young. I do live at 167 East Fremont. With my final 3 minutes on the subject of EEC and the East Fremont neighborhood, I have a few words. They focus around community, frustration, and disappointment. For community, the reason we're here is because East Fremont is a community and a neighborhood. We are not a transitional area of town, as EEC likes to paint us. We're a united community of families who have chosen Elmhurst as our home. We are families, seniors, disabled residents, and most importantly, taxpayers. I am proud of them for fighting for their homes. Frustration. I am frustrated in the process of all of this. Way too many side meetings, revised plans, and submissions of letters upon letters upon letters from the plaintiff, all outside of the public hearing. Yes, they can be found on your website after searching, but they're very hard to follow. Even as a highly interested party, when the DPZ met, I wasn't even sure what version of the plan they were discussing. It may not even be clear to you tonight. I do not consider this transparency. Finally, disappointment. I'm disappointed in this city and in this process. As a licensed broker in this town, I know that Elmhurst is known in this county for its high standards in building and zoning codes. It's what keeps our property values high and helps to keep families here and returning to our community. Elmhurst is a great place to invest. Now you're tossing these standards aside for one business enterprise. The comprehensive plan, which is all over your website and quoted in all of your city plans, is now referenced dismissively as just a guide, as according to the DPZ. Please explain to realtors selling in post-EEC Elmhurst how to advise clients buying or selling single-family homes adjacent to C2 zoning. That zoning could change any time. Elmhurst is for sale. Let's talk about Mr. Day threatening to report to the real estate board, a prominent local realtor who wrote an opinion that property values would be negatively impacted, effectively silencing my colleague. This is wrong for East Fremont. This is wrong for Elmhurst. You know it. No amount of landscaping or lighting will change the fact that this enormous building will dissect our neighborhood and put it at risk, the 6 properties to the east, to the very same fate. We ask you to stand behind your zoning standards. They are there for a reason. The citizens who elected you expect you to stand behind them and to support Elmhurst and the residents of East Fremont. Thank you.
Tim Young, 167 East Fremont.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tim Young. I live at 167 East Fremont. Fremont Street, east of York Road, is a residential neighborhood comprised of single-family homes. There are no structures of the EEC proposed size and unit count on Fremont between the cul-de-sac and York Road. The purpose of the various zoning requirements is to prevent the building of a multi-unit facility such as this in a residential neighborhood of single-family homes. To date, the EEC has not proven a need for this facility in the community, nor have they met the requirements for conditional use. What they have done is divert attention from the core issue by inundating the city and community with documentation and misleading information. The cases they referred to in the February 1st letter to the DPC are not relevant. They either refer to restrictive zoning targeting group homes or refer to the use of existing single-family structures for group homes. Neither applies in this situation. The EEC has been insinuating and implying that Fremont residents are discriminating against people with disabilities, basically bullying the city and the Fremont residents. My wife and I take extreme offense to these insinuations regarding disabilities and discrimination. We have an 11-year-old daughter with Down syndrome. The neighborhood has embraced her, specifically the McNichols and Zapata families. Their children have been fabulous with her. We do not discriminate against people with disabilities. Let me repeat, we do not discriminate against people with disabilities. The applicant appears to be setting the groundwork for litigation if the conditional use permit is denied. I would encourage you to remove the threat of litigation from the equation as you consider the applicant's request. The threat of legal action is just as great from the Fremont residents if the condition use is approved. Please reject this application. Thank you.
Andrew Hebert, that's it, 163 East Fremont.
Hi, my name's Andrew Hebert. I live at 163 East Fremont. Thanks for letting me speak tonight regarding the EECC's expansion onto Fremont Ave. I ran into Mr. Levin as he exited the train today, and I told him what I'll tell you now. I would be okay with the outcome of this case if I felt like the city's process was being followed in a fair and logical way. A year ago, the ZPC denied the EECC conditional use on 3 different grounds. I'm going to focus on one issue in particular. As we all know, a nursing home is permitted on any residentially zoned street as long as it submits a conditional use application. One of the criteria, as you heard several times now, of the application is that the proposed structure conforms to the city's comprehensive plan. It's a big plan, so I'm going to quote page 68 specifically, which says in the housing section, Goal 3, promote strong neighborhoods throughout Elmhurst, and policy number 2, new and developed residential uses should be compatible in scale and character with the surrounding residential uses. A year ago, after the ZPC denied the conditional use, the DPZ also voted 3-0 to deny conditional use. I know there's quite a bit of material in file, so I'd like to read a couple of quotes from the DPZ deliberation from a year ago. The first one says, but in my opinion, it's more about the factors that are concerned about the compatibility and scale, primarily, and how it fits in the neighborhood, not because what it is. And quote number 2, that was from Mr. Levin, and Mr. Mulliner followed by saying, just a couple comments that I would like to make, is that I agree wholeheartedly that it doesn't fit the scale, it just isn't there. If this was taking some of the properties down on Lake Street and maybe getting the last couple of homes on Lake that were adjacent to the apartment complex, I think that's a different story. But this is, it's just right in the middle of a block. It's just too difficult to justify putting a basically large building in the middle of a neighborhood, so I just can't go along with it, so I'm in total agreement. That was a year ago. As we know, the vote never made it to City Council. Mr. Levin made an attempt to work with the EECC by having them recess the building and eliminate the parking lot. And while these changes are ones that we appreciate, as you can see from the comments at the DPZ deliberation, the issues why the building was rejected especially concerned the size and scale of the structure. It's still a 40,000 square foot plus structure in the middle of a block where the average house is only 3,000 square feet. I would like to say without question, this structure is not compatible in scale with the houses on our street. This year's submittal is about the same size as last year's, so I'm not sure why the arguments presented by Mr. Levin and Mr. Mulliner should not still hold true. In this year's DPC deliberation, Alderman Toledo said that scale was not an issue because the structure's footprint does not exceed 30% of the lot. But that's not what the comprehensive plan says, so I'll quote again, new and redeveloped residential uses should be compatible in scale and character with the surrounding residential uses. I think the intent of the plan was to make sure that the building fit in with the rest of the buildings on the street. Otherwise, the plan would just say, must be 30% of lot.
Sir, could you wrap up your comments, please?
So, in terms of whether or not this 40,000 square plus foot structure is in scale with the surrounding buildings, I would like to say no, it's not, and no resident of Elmhurst that I've asked believes that it is. Thank you.
Moriarty, 404 South Argyle.
Hello, my name is Maura Moriarty. Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. All I have to say is planes, trains, automobiles, water is every resident's concern when there's a major development aside to them. Now there's a new concern that you're introducing to all residents. It's the conditional use and how it complies or how it fits in to the residential structure. You are elected officials to represent the people of Elmhurst. My question to you is, do you want this development next to your house? Would your neighbors want this development next to you and to your neighborhood? So please consider that when this issue's on the council. Thank you.
I have one more that signed in. Last to sign in is Gregory Pellico. Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Mr.
I'm sorry, I was talking to our city attorney.
Mr. Pellico would like to be last in case someone else would like to speak. He's last on the sign-in sheet, but he is asking if he could be last if there's any other people that didn't sign in.
All right. We'll see if we can accommodate Mr. Pellico. Pellico, is it?
Pellico.
Pellico. Okay, so normally I wait until the last person who signed up, but I'm happy to switch it up a little bit. At this time, is there anybody who did not have an opportunity to sign in on our sign-in sheet, yet still wishes to address the council? If so, please raise your hand so I can get a count. 1, 2. Raise them high, please. Well, I'm going to go left to right, so I'm going to keep it up to you folks to remember if I've called on you or not. So we're going to start left to right. Mr. Pellico, you're more than welcome to wait till the end if you want. Far left here, the gentleman three rows back. Yes, you, sir. Same rules apply even if you didn't sign in. Please state your name when you get to the microphone, and look forward to your comments.
Good evening. My name is Alan Quarry, and I'm going to give a different perspective on this. I live at 413 North Howard in Elmhurst. It's a small block, dead end. It doesn't dead end, it curves at the highway. So when you come down Howard, you curve and you turn onto Lake Street. I represent a group of residents. Some of them are too old to show up tonight. Some of them have children in activities tonight and they couldn't make it. We are not opposed to change. The addition of a 4,000 square foot nursing home presents a dangerous increase in the issues that we already have on our block. Currently, the nursing home staff presents a safety issue on a daily basis. Staff continuously speed through our neighborhood when late for work in the morning and excited to leave from work in the evening. I have, over the past 6 years, brought this issue to my alderman and have been amazed at the lack of effort to assist us with this issue. For those of you unaware, this section of Howard only has 300 feet of sidewalk for the entire block. 3 times in the last 6 years, we have had a patrol car on our street, and he or she will write 3 tickets in 20 minutes, and then we won't see them for another 2 years. People roll through the stop sign, speed down the street. If they sit there, they write 3 tickets, they're gone. The additional traffic to and from the nursing home will increase tremendously with this new 40,000 square foot structure. In addition to the safety hazard you create for the children simply on their way home from school, where are you going to park all the cars for the additional staff and visitors? As far as I can see, the lot is currently at capacity daily. That means we will have cars parked up and down Howard, which makes seeing children more difficult and further endangering their safety. This will also make playing in the front yard something the young children on the block no longer will be able to do. Furthermore, I'm sure I don't even have to remind you of the impact this will have on property values, as has already been stated. We have lived at 413 Howard for 14 years. I'm a York graduate, lived in Elmhurst for over 40 years. All 4 of my children went through District 205. The neighbors of the nursing home should not be punished so the businesses on Lake Street can bend the rules and gain larger profit. This is a plan as we residents and as a city cannot afford to agree to. To what end are we willing to go? When you're endangering the lives of our children walking home from school in the street because we have no sidewalks. They're walking home from school. We've got employees speeding down the street. We're going to endanger the lives of children and the quality of their lives with this monstrosity in the neighborhood. We have to say no.
Yep, that was the next guy. Excuse me, the last person who spoke, sir, are you sitting down right?
Yes.
Can you spell your last name?
Quarrie, 413 Howard.
Got it, thank you.
Good evening, my name's Greg DeVork. I live on 174 East Fremont. I just want short and quick. I pulled up the webpage, City of Elmhurst. It says, the Planning and Zoning Division has primary responsibility for coordination of short and long-range planning activities and the administration of appropriate city ordinances to protect neighborhood character, enhance the quality of life within the context of the city's comprehensive plan. That's the website, City of Elmhurst. Thank you very much.
What we should be talking, George Fisher, 161 East Fremont. What we should be talking about is what type of single-family homes the owner of this land will be building there. It is so obvious, just plain common sense, the structure is not, and I repeat, not, belong there. So with our midterm elections going on right now, let's say there's a question of whether to allow or not to allow a large business structure to be built in the middle of your street of a single-family home. And what do you think the overwhelming majority of the vote would be? Who do you represent? Do you represent the people of Elmhurst? Let's keep them in mind, and that's the people on Fremont. Thank you.
How many people we have left on this left-hand side? Was there anyone else who wanted to speak? This lady in front? Okay, anyone else from this side? Okay. Lady in the gray t-shirt, you're up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Julie McNichols, 185 East Fremont. I'm not going to talk for very long, so you've heard me over and over again. But I wanted to just bring up a couple things that are still bothering me a little bit. One of them is the issues with the application that's still on file. Page 6 of the application still lists outpatient services. So if the basis for recommending this is due to the residential nature of this facility, it can't be both. So that's my first concern. My second concern is that our neighbors had some flooding issues a few years back and asked the city if they could pump their water out of their yard onto Lake Street. And the city said no, because Lake Street couldn't handle it. So I'm not sure how it's going to handle the nursing home pumping all the water to Lake Street from their facility. That's really all I have. I just want you to consider the fact that if this were your home, I don't think any one of you, I think you'd all feel the same way that we do. So please keep that in mind. Thanks for your time.
Okay, anyone else on the left-hand side, my left-hand side of the room? Okay, anyone on this side of the room? Okay, I see one lady. Anyone else? I see two. All right, left to right. You in the far back, you're next.
My name's Lynn Kirby, and I live at 502 South Washington Street, and I just wanted to share what other people have said as well. We wouldn't want this structure in our neighborhood. I don't think any Elmhurst residents would want the structure next to their house, and our neighbors would be equally as upset if a structure was being built in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Kitty Killian. I'm new to all this. I just moved into Elmhurst on Kenilworth, right on the corner almost of Kenilworth and Fremont. And since I've moved in, there's a lot of houses being built. So I've been going through construction since I moved in, and I'm just wondering what's going to happen with all the traffic that comes down Fremont. It'll hit Kenilworth, which is the next street. Very disappointing. I would hope you would say no. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else who has not had an opportunity to speak wishes to address the council at this time? Oh, I'm sorry. What was his name, Patty?
Pellico.
Mr. Pellico, looks like you're going to clean it up.
My name is Greg Pellico. I'm a resident on East Fremont. My family was here since the 60s, as well as many others here. Fremont is a quiet residential cul-de-sac street. Beautiful new homes are being built on our street and in our neighborhood, bringing up our property values. Elmhurst Extended Care does not care about us. They care only about money. They want to put their facility sandwiched between our homes, which is completely out of character with our cul-de-sac street. We should not be forced to have a commercial property shoved down our throats, sandwiched between our homes. I consulted with an attorney downtown in a downtown law firm who is a zoning law attorney and a Fair Housing Act attorney, and he told me that there is nothing that gives the nursing home an implicit right to expand onto our residential street. He told me that he would be happy to represent the residents against the city that infringes upon our rights. I discussed this with some of our residents. This last proposal isn't any different from their previous proposal. The building is just as big. It's set back the same distance as the last proposal, which the zoning committee rejected. The difference is basically, the way I see it, is that instead of a parking lot facing Fremont, there's a grassy area. I'd like you to think about how you would like it if this happened to you on your block between your homes. We will photograph each and every one of your homes and see if there is anything like this on your streets. I just want to conclude by saying the city will be faced with a lawsuit. I discussed this with some of our residents, and we agreed that if the city allows Elmhurst Extended Care to extend their building on our quiet residential street, we will sue the city and will make sure that the television, news, and social media will expose that Elmhurst residents have a lawsuit against the city for the city's lack of concern to us residents.
Okay. Last chance. Anyone else? Seeing none, that wraps up public forum for this evening. On to announcements. Any announcements from the dais? Clerk Spencer, is there an election coming up?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. And it's actually tomorrow, Tuesday, March 20th, is our primary election, and we'll be voting for federal, state, and county offices. Polls will open at 6 p.m. and close at 6 a.m., excuse me, and close at 7 p.m. If anyone doesn't know their polling place or have any questions regarding voting, you can call DuPage County Elections Commission at 630-407-5600.
Wonderful. Okay. Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Due to the spring break week next week, the Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee will not have a quorum on Monday night. We're going to meet on this coming Friday morning, March 23rd at 9 a.m. We've got some business related to some insurance that is timely and we need to take care of. And it's the only time we're going to be able to do it. So again, the committee will be meeting Friday, March 23rd at 9 a.m. here at City Hall.
Okay. Any other announcements? Seeing none, we'll go on to the consent agenda. At this time, is there any item on the consent agenda any alderman wishes to have removed, to provide further comment, or vote no? Alderman Bram.
6.12.
Any others? Alderman Brennan.
6.14.
6.12, 6.14. Anyone else? Okay. I will now entertain a motion. Hold on, let me get this right. I now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus items 6.12 and 6.14. Motion by Alderman York, second by Alderman Toledo. Discussion, Clerk Spencer.
Polumsky. Aye. Bram.
Aye.
Toledo. Aye. York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Onquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino. Absent. Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn. Absent. Leader.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays. Excuse me, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Consent agenda is approved minus items 6.12 and 6.14. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to read the recommendation. Item 6.12, it's a report out of Public Affairs and Safety.
It is there, excuse me. It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Affairs and Safety Committee that the City Council approve the intergovernmental agreement, being the Intergovernmental Police Service Assistance Agreement, as part of the FAIT membership process. The committee recommends the city attorney be authorized to prepare the necessary documents for City Council approval. Signed by Scott M. Levin, Chairman, Danny Polumsky, Vice Chairman, Bob Dunn.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the report and recommendation is read. Motion by Alderman Levin, second by Alderman Polumsky. Alderman Levin.
Thank you, Mayor. This report is to authorize the Elmhurst Police Department to join the Felony Investigative Assistance Team, FIAT. It's a task force that's been in existence since about 1976. It's basically a group that shares resources for major crimes, for investigations. It puts at our department's disposal and we to others immediate resources. Right now, for instance, if we wanted to call in a K-9 unit, we would have to call around and see who might accommodate. This membership allows us to a more direct route to access resources. The cost is $3,500 a year, and some staffing will go with that. That's the report.
Okay. Any comments? Alderman Bram.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Being an alumni of the Elmhurst Citizens Police Academy, when I saw this report on the agenda, it brought to my attention on what I learned in the police academy of that I thought we already have a similar, and I thought we already participated in the DuPage, I think it's called Major Crime Task Force, which sounds identical to this. So my question is this in replacement of or in addition to, since, and as I was speaking, I saw some head nods by the mayor as well as the city manager, that this is identical or very much similar to what we already participate in. So is this in addition or replacing?
It's an addition to. It's much like the Major Crimes Task Force. It's just another group that allows us to share resources and, you know, for the betterment of our police force. So it's not, it doesn't replace. I think this group's a little further south. Is that a fair statement? Just a different group that we're participating in.
Okay.
But it functions almost in a similar manner. We pool resources in an effort to address the issues.
In regards to that, and one of the other reasons why I asked was I wanted to understand what the future looked like in regards to what we do with the police department. Alderman Levin just made mention of, you know, our K-9 unit. Sharing in the K-9 unit is one thing. We currently, Elmhurst currently has a K-9 unit, or a K-9 dog, or a dog, I should say, not a whole unit.
Most dogs are canines, yes.
Yes, they are. So I wanted to make sure that we're not going away from that, where we're not going to just be sharing with Fiat and DuPage Major Crime Task Force, that we plan to remain a viable police force and having a K-9 unit and having some of these things that this program mentions.
There's no indication, and there was nothing presented that would suggest we're changing staffing or resources. This is just something that I think we should encourage, which is sharing of resources, as long as they don't overtax our resources, and the chief believes this is a good program.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Clerk Spencer.
Polumsky.
Aye.
Bram.
Aye.
Toledo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino. Absent. Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn. Absent. Leader.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Agenda item 6.12 is approved. On to agenda item 6.14. This is a report out of Public Affairs and Safety. Clerk Spencer, I ask that you read the recommendation.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Affairs and Safety Committee that the City Council approve the revisions to Article 21 Comprehensive Regulation of Tobacco Products as recommended by the City Attorney. The committee recommends the City Attorney be authorized to prepare the necessary documents for City Council approval. Signed by Scott M. Levin, Chair, Danny Polumsky, Vice Chairman, and Bob Dunn.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman Levin, second by Alderman Polumsky. Alderman Levin.
Thank you, Mayor. This was introduced to the committee by, I guess indirectly, Alderman Polumsky, who sits ex officio on the Commission on Youth. I won't call it the Juvenile Commission anymore. And in working with the police department, there was recognition that there's been a problem with students in the schools expanding their use of vaping in particular. They're now built into looks like flash drives or other kind of devices. And as the school system and the police are looking at ways to deal with it, they have school discipline, then there's a state statute which largely parallels what we're adopting, except much like the situation we have with underage drinking, there's a medium step we have where we can deal with it through a city ordinance, so it can be handled as a civil matter, and we don't then have to immediately jump to a state statute charge that would put the youth into the juvenile justice system. This would allow us a way to handle the same infraction but on an ordinance level and keep the juvenile out of the juvenile justice, criminal justice system. The only other change it makes is that we would now require the 3 or so stores that do not have tobacco licenses that are selling only vaping products would be required to be licensed. It's not a terrible economic burden. The license is, I believe, $50. So that's the background. And
okay, any other comments? Alderman Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I pulled this report from the consent agenda to simply raise public awareness. For some reason, many of our youth look at vaping pens and e-cigarettes as a cool thing, a cleaner way to get a nicotine fix, when in reality, vaping can lead to more extreme risk-taking behaviors when it comes to substance use and abuse. So I'm in full support of this report and want to thank the committee for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Clerk Spencer.
Palumski.
Aye.
Bram.
Aye.
Toledo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino, absent. Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn, absent. Leader.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Agenda item 6.14 is approved. On to agenda 7. Agenda item 7, committee reports. 7.1, Clerk Spencer. It's a report out of finance, and ask that you read the recommendation.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee that the City Council designate the Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee to manage the electric aggregation program renewal process for the potential 2018 renewal, and to approve the electric supply bid for the 2018 renewal. The Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee further recommends that the City Council approve contracting with NIMIC for electric, okay, thank you, for electric aggregation consultant services for the 2018 renewal at the fee structure stated above for 1, 2, or 3-year contract terms. Signed by Kevin L. York, Chairman, Mark P. Sabatino, Vice Chairman, Tina Park, and Mike Brennan.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman York, second by Alderman Brennan. Alderman York, your report.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a report just primarily to give us the opportunity to take a look at electric aggregation. As everyone will recall, we did this 2 years ago, and then quickly the market electricity rates became better than what we'd contracted for, so we made a recommendation for people to opt out. Our consultant, NIMEC, who we've been using since the inception of the electric aggregation program, has kind of looked ahead and perhaps sees an opportunity for there to be some savings in electric rate by participating in an aggregation program. So this report, 3-page report's not the longest report on the agenda tonight, which is unusual. So just basically ask for City Council approval to explore the opportunities to bring an aggregation program back. It gives the committee the duty to review the quotes that we receive from the open market and make a recommendation. Well, we have to review them because it's like selling bonds, it's time sensitive. So we need to meet about it. It'll be an open meeting, and give our vote if we want to present an electric aggregation program to the citizens of Elmhurst.
Okay. Questions or comments? Clerk Spencer.
Palumski.
Aye.
Bram.
Aye.
Toledo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino, absent. Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn, absent. Leader.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Agenda item 7.1 is approved. On to 7.2, Clerk Spencer. This is a report out of DP&Z, and I ask that you read the recommendation.
Therefore, the Development Planning and Zoning Committee recommends that the City Council approve the applicant's request for a conditional use permit subdivision and open parentheses lot consolidation close parentheses and rezoning of the entire property to R2 single-family residential. The existing parking spaces located on Lake Street frontage will be grandfathered as a legal, non-conforming condition. The city attorney is hereby directed to prepare the necessary documents for city council approval. Signed by Michael Honquist, Chairman, Noel Toludo, Vice Chairman, and Mark A. Mulliner.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman Honquist, second by Alderman Toludo. Alderman Honquist, your report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As my colleagues can read through this extensive report that was put together by staff, and I want to thank staff for taking the time to lay this out in a great amount of detail. This case has been ongoing since September of 2016. I'm just going to go through a few highlights tonight with the assumption everybody's been through this, which I know you have, and then we can discuss. So this case was originally voted down by the DPC committee. At that time, the applicant pulled the case back and made some substantial changes, which, as we all know, then requires to go back through the commission, which it did. It worked its way through multiple public hearings and then back to our committee. After review of the plan, the committee unanimously supported this on a 3-0 vote. And then at that time, we had Alderman Polonsky came forward with some requests by the neighborhood, a number of items that total about 13, and the applicant, to their credit, addressed 11 of those 13. And that happened most recently this month. So tonight, we're at a point where we're asking for City Council approval of this case and to move it forward. So I ask for your support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Comments or questions? Any comments? Alderman Polonsky.
Thank you, Mayor. Many have weighed in on this project, and I appreciate the perspectives. I want to thank the residents for their questions, their engagement, and their advocacy. I also want to thank the Zoning and Planning Commission, the Development Planning and Zoning Committee, and city staff for their work. And I especially want to recognize Chairman Honquist for his willingness to bring this topic back to the DP&Z committee, though the committee was ready to send a recommendation to the council weeks ago. I appreciate his consideration, along with that of Alderman Toludo and Mulliner, in adding the attributes as requested by some of the residents that would be required as conditions if this project is approved. As we have heard in public comment, the objections from the neighbors focus on if and to what extent the proposed building fits into the neighborhood. And like the neighbors, I see a large facility being an anomaly in the middle of a block of a single-family home, of single-family homes. And evaluating the conditions required for a conditional use, we must be able to determine that a project is not injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the vicinity, and that it will not impair property values. We must be able to conclude that the project will not impede the normal and orderly development and the improvement of the surrounding property. I do believe representatives from Elmhurst Extended Care made the effort to enhance their design and have come closer to satisfying these standards by incorporating suggestions made by some of the neighboring residents. And I want to thank Elmhurst Extended Care for offering to meet with neighbors to come up with a landscape plan if this moves forward after tonight. I appreciate the willingness to cooperate on this. But not all suggestions to make the design more fitting were incorporated. And even if they were, I could not say the project meets the standards. I do not support it.
Any other comments? Alderman Levin.
I may have additional comments, but one of the questions I wanted to ask is if the committee could share some of their thoughts of why the commission disapproval is being recommended to be overridden and how it is different than the last application. And I'm not suggesting anything in my question other than wanting some information.
Anyone on the committee care to expound on additional deliberations or considerations you had during your meetings?
I'll take that, Mr. Mayor. When the applicant Number one, to address the commission did come forward with a split vote. You can read through their deliberation. When we took the case and reviewed our code to what the applicant had done through their revisions, we felt that it matched the requirements that we have as a city, both from a height and from a spatial footprint standpoint, as well as from stormwater and most of the other elements we look at. So after reviewing it in some great detail, I think one of the valid points that my colleague brought forward were if this were a very wealthy individual and decided to buy 3 lots and put up a house of similar characteristics, they could do so under a code without any sort of conditional use. So I know that helped me as we move forward. It's an unusual case, but at the end of the day, that's what we rested on.
Thank you. May I follow up with some comments?
Yes, Alderman Levin.
Thank you. I'm interested to hear what other aldermen have to say, and I've frankly gone back and forth on this one. I did vote against it in the original iteration in the 16 zoning case. There are certain things that aren't factors. I don't think anyone's saying that Fremont neighbors are being discriminatory against people with disabilities. I've never really heard that discussed at any level that I've been involved in. I don't think any of the aldermen that are talking about it look at that. I don't think, on the other hand, I also think it's not true that EEC only cares about money. I think they're trying to extend a business that cares about people and they care about their business. I also know that, as was suggested, I did suggest the new configuration, and I think it's important to point out that the new configuration is different. The orientation is not north to south, so it sets back the building substantially from where it was in the original iteration. There was significant complaints by the neighbors about parking being in front, traffic on Fremont, and the driveway being used, and that was all eliminated by the new configuration. So objectively, that is different. I follow that up with saying, as I asked the question, it's been said frequently that it's unusual and not standard for the council to overrule the commission. It was a split vote, but as they say in baseball, about which I know little, the tie goes to the runner. And in this case, it didn't get passed. Some of the other things that I've heard are from the neighbors that have contacted me and others, do you want this next to your house? And who's going to say yes? But nursing homes and churches and several other kinds of conditional uses are permitted in neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods like this. And as I thought about this issue over the months, I drive around, I see in my ward a number of places where a house is directly adjacent to a church parking lot or to a church 10 feet away. I'm not picking on churches, it's just I'm saying it's a similar institutional structure. So there will always be negative impact when someone builds a larger building next to yours, and the standard isn't that it will not affect your property value whatsoever, but will it substantially diminish the property value. I got a call from a resident in my ward on Friday, which had nothing to do with this, but his complaint was that the house next door had been torn down and a very large house completely within the constraints of code is being built, and it is so blocking his house that he is saying, I'm going to tear my garage down and have to move it to another piece of the property, part of the property, so that I may be able to look out my back windows on the first floor and get any kind of view whatsoever. Again, would that diminish his property value? Yes, there are rights, and I think the example that you gave, Chairman, is important. This is a very difficult issue, and the question's asked, who do we represent? We represent the residents, but we also represent the city as a whole. And I can think of a number of developments, particularly in the downtown area, where if we only listen to those who were directly impacted, developments that are now thought of as being very important to our city would not have been built. And there are rights not only of residents, but there are rights of the businesses too, and whether you agree or disagree, whether speaking to the alderman, not to the audience, that the nursing home is a residential or not, it has a right to be heard. So this is one that I struggle with. Those are my thoughts, and that's all I have for right now.
Any other comments? Alderman Toludo.
Thank you. And thank you, Alderman Levin, for your comments. And I think I wanted to just recognize that it is unusual for us to go against or to have a different point of view than a commission. I think this is a very unique circumstance, first off, because of the fact that it was a split vote. So we have to dig and peel back the layers of the onion a little bit more. And in this situation, we were actually very fortunate to have a copy of the actual deliberation by the commission, which often we don't have. And when you take the time, which I'm sure most of, or if not all of you have done, to read those transcripts, as well as the transcripts of our committee deliberation, with regard to the commission's deliberation, you'll see in their discussion on various components of the standards that there was not even consensus at the standard level. So the vote itself, the entire culmination of their vote, which was a split vote, 4-4, represents, again, the lack of consensus at each standard level. And the reason why I think that that's important is that this is not a clear-cut case. This has a lot of details to it. And in a unique circumstance like this, it's the duty of all of us to make a judgment based on the facts of the case and based on our interpretation of the laws and the ordinances, and understand that just because a 4-4 technically becomes a vote against, that we need to weigh all of the factors and understand that there wasn't consensus even at the lower level of each standard. So I just wanted to help everyone understand what was behind that 4-4 vote. Thank you.
Alderman Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report before us captures 18 months of much work and stressful deliberation by many. Frankly, if the applicant's original plan was before us this evening, I would not be in support of it for numerous reasons that I won't go into. But that said, tonight's report shows that the applicant has significantly leaned in and modified their plan starting in June of 2017 to present to represent concerns raised by many in the community. In reviewing this report, the applicant's current plan, inclusive of the architectural elevation plans on Fremont, I'm satisfied with their commitment to have this project coexist in the neighborhood. And for that reason, I'll be voting yes this evening in support of the report and expect that Elmhurst Extended Care to continue to strive to be a good neighbor. Thank you.
Alderman Bram.
Thank you. Problem with my voice tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The one question before I even talk about other points, and one of the, I believe it was Eileen actually brought it up this evening, I want to touch on and I want to ask the city attorney to weigh in on, and that is the conversation of legislative versus administrative when it comes to conditional use. I think I know I've heard from the residents in regards to that. I know my understanding of conditional use being legislative for the years that I've served up here, but this case has brought the concern to me and as well as to some of my neighbors on how do we view conditional use cases, because I think if we are what I would deem to be changing on how we view conditional use, I think we're setting a precedence that I think everybody who sits up here should be concerned about. I think it should be legislative. That's how I always looked at it, and I would like for the city attorney to please provide an opinion on, is conditional use legislative or administrative?
Let me just say that I don't think that we should change how we look at conditional uses in the city of Elmhurst. I think we should look at them the same way we've looked at them previously. And having said that, I know that there's been testimony given, legal testimony given on just what the standards ought to be and how we ought to look at them, but I do not think that we should look at them any different.
Thank you. With that said, I think, to me, this is a clear-cut case. To me, if we're looking at the conditional use standards legislatively, then it's a slam dunk. And a slam dunk in regards to needing to deny this applicant's petition. Some of the residents, at least two, if not more than that, already spoke to what our own code says when it comes to conditional use. I understand what our comprehensive plan says in the beginning stages in the executive summary, that this is only a guide, and I've heard it before any time that we've talked about a plan, any plan for that matter, if it's the MUTCD, if it's the comprehensive plan. But we have to default to what the code says. I don't care what that beginning statement says in the comprehensive plan. The code specifically states, and sorry to reiterate what some of the residents have said, that the proposed conditional use is not, well, let me read the standards first. Standards, no conditional use shall be recommended by the Zoning and Planning Commission unless they shall find that the proposed conditional use is not contrary to the objectives of the current comprehensive plan for the city. And that's 1 out of 7. In the comprehensive plan, it says that these lots are residential and it should remain residential. And I guess you can kind of dip into the gray area, is EECC's building residential or not. R2 to me, and what I believe the code states as well, is single-family residential. This development is not single-family residential. So with that, and that alone, I think that we should be denying this petition because of what our own code says. And if we don't, we are setting a precedence. Conditional use will no longer mean conditional use going forward. So no matter where in the city, if it's next to my house or anybody's house, that we will automatically put the burden of proof on the opposite end, not on the applicant, but on the people who are against the applicant. We've always had the burden of proof on the applicant. Why do we sit here today and say, well, the applicant in this case has made some conditions and has tried to work with the neighborhood, so that's good enough? That's not acceptable. Our own code says that it's not acceptable. So if our own code says it, how are we overriding our own code? Now, I want to touch on something that nobody spoke about as of yet. The talk about a lawsuit. The talk about a lawsuit from the applicant, and some residents on Fremont stated that they will consider suing. That shouldn't play into it at all. Whatever it was, 6 months ago, we had a report before the council that was pulled back to the committee. The rationale I don't really know on why it was pulled back. I was ready to vote that night, and I think we all should have moved forward with a vote that night. But we are here today, and I don't care on what was done, either threat by neighbors or by the applicant. And I'm not saying either of them came out directly. But the applicant did what they felt was right, and they were documenting every step of the way. And I will applaud Mr. Dave, I hope I said your name right, for extending an invite to me, and I took him up on that to walk the facility, to check out the facility. And I applaud him for wanting to move forward with redoing, my time's up, Dee? Redoing his facility. I don't blame him for that. I think it's what he should be looking at doing to stay competitive in the market. But I will say that I don't think this is going about it the right way. At that time, we had discussions, and he was very direct with me, and I applauded him that day, that he said that he was documenting something for a reason. I don't know if he went past that statement, but he was documenting for a reason. Obviously, I took my own perspective on that statement. He needs to do, or the EECC, I should say, I shouldn't be singling out an individual, needs to do what they feel is right. But no matter what, if a lawsuit comes about, we shouldn't be afraid of a lawsuit. We need, as a city, to stand the ground on what the ordinances say. And that ordinance on conditional use says it all to me. The other thing is, ZPC, the Zoning Planning Commission, has voted it down. And you could say they voted it down once, but that's not reality. They voted it down twice. Because in the case, as Alderman Levin said, the tie goes to the runner, and the runner in this case would be against the petitioner. So the commission, as well, the first report, approximately 6 months ago that was before us, was in favor to deny the petitioner's request. Has there been changes? Yes. It still doesn't meet what I view to be the 7 standards of the conditional use, and I agree with the commission on both counts. They denied it twice. We should deny it up here today, just upon the ordinance itself. I do want to say that I want to compliment everybody. Like I already said, Mr. Dave for extending the invite, my neighbors, the year-and-a-half long debate and keeping in step with what was going on. I applaud all of you for that, as well as the commission and the committee, because I know it's been a very long and drawn-out task. This is a land use case that could set a precedent going forward. And I'm asking all of you to seriously consider what precedent we set here tonight. And that precedent is land use. That precedent is greater than just that. It's conditional use in its bare bones form. We need to deny this, and I hope you all agree.
Okay. Any other comments? Alderman Levin.
Thank you. Just some additional thoughts that I've been hearing as others have spoken, and I know I shouldn't take up more than my time, but there is a requirement that we look at the city plan when we consider this, but planning, the city's plan and how we look at things is different than zoning. So if you look at the zoning for residential, it specifically permits institutions such as the one that is being presented. So it's not inconsistent with the plan if, by definition, our residential zoning code allows it to occur. Conditional use, and I'm only giving my opinion, you get paid to give the city's opinion, but in my opinion, it means it's okay in a neighborhood. The zoning code contemplates that it may occur. The burden is on the applicant. I don't know that if anyone says otherwise, I completely disagree. And the applicant has to prove that they meet each of the standards for a conditional use. But if you meet those standards, then you must, in my opinion, legally be granted that conditional use. So that's the standard I'm looking at here, and then I hear about the lawsuit, and as we've heard, we're probably going to get sued either way. So, you know, I don't think we're afraid of a lawsuit. We just can't choose which one we're going to get. It might happen, it might not. I think we have to look at it as a council in terms of what is the right thing to do. We must follow the law. And so if our legal counsel tells us that, you know, that we may have a problem, and he's not saying that, but if that's the feeling, that there may be a problem if we were to deny this, that's something we have to take into account, because we have taken an oath to follow the law. The commission makes a recommendation, but we're the final word. Some famous president says the buck stops here, and the buck does stop here. So after all of the wrangling, we have to make the final decision. I don't see anything precedential about what we're talking about, because we are going to, it could be precedent if we get sued and it's a fair housing claim, but For the way we're handling it, I don't see this as any different way than we have to address or have addressed any conditional use since I've been on the council, which is not as long as some. But that's my final word, and thank you for all your time.
Any additional comments? Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the comments that Alderman Levin has offered, and a lot of his thoughts, I think, are, I share his thoughts. I think this was an easier decision when the proposal had the parking and the curb cuts on Fremont. That made it, in my mind, a much cleaner distinction about whether or not it fits with the neighborhood. I think this is perhaps the toughest decision that I have faced on council. I've disagreed with certain things, but I've felt confident in the position I've taken. This is one I can see the case both ways. At different times over the past few weeks, I think I've had the argument in my mind both ways, and going back and forth on that. I think the difficulty, it's not just mine. I think it's reflected in the time it's taken to get to this point, the number of meetings, and Alderman Toledo mentioned the transcripts, which, it's interesting to go back and see, even in the transcripts, there was lots of indecision and seeing this issue in different ways. I do think the current proposal is a dramatic improvement over what was originally proposed. And I also agree with Alderman Levin that I don't think this sets a precedent. We're hearing from our city attorney that we should continue to use the standards and evaluate them as we have in the past. I think part of the challenge of those standards is that there's not a black and white answer. It becomes very subjective. So those are my thoughts. I'm inclined to support the proposal at this time, but I do appreciate all the comments that have been made and recognizing this is a really tough decision.
Any other comments? Alderman Bram.
I'll just say the last, since I emphasized the last time I spoke just on the one standard, I don't agree that all the standards have met, other than the one that I spoke. Number 2 that's listed, the conditional use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted, nor substantially diminish and impair property values within the neighborhood. I think that the neighborhood has presented evidence and sworn testimony that this would not be the case. And I do look at, all of these standards, and they're vague for a reason. They're vague to allow for judgment for all of us who sit up here to decide if they're met or not met. But by reviewing the information on this case, I believe strongly that number 2 is not met. I also believe, as I already spoke, tied to the comprehensive plan, that 6 is not met, and one can argue even the first standard is not met. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Clerk Spencer, please call the vote.
Polensky.
No.
Bram.
No.
Toledo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Onquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino, absent. Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn, absent. Leader.
Aye.
10 ayes, 2 nays, 2 absent.
10 ayes, 2 nays, motion carries. Report is approved. On to agenda item 8, reports and recommendations of appointed elected officials. Mayor Morley, that's me. We'll take a brief pause in the meeting, allow anybody who wants to leave at this time to do so. Okay, on with my report. Really only one thing. I know we have a long meeting and we have a lot more to cover. Elmhurst had its 22nd or 23rd? 22nd annual St. Pat's Parade. It was cold and crisp, but it was a success. I want to thank Jim O'Connor. Jim O'Connor, I don't know how he does it, dedicates hundreds of hours to this, to put this parade on every year, and he does a marvelous job. He also does a great job in pulling together a lot of volunteers, including the young gentleman from Elmhurst College who helped volunteer, along with Elmhurst residents. I want to thank Elmhurst staff, police and fire, and public works. And finally, I want to thank the citizens of Elmhurst for coming out, enjoying a good time without any really major incidences. I think it's great that Elmhurst, by doing this parade, Elmhurst is allowed to celebrate 2 St. Patrick's Days. Not only is that a great thing to do, and my daughter just got her DNA test back. She's like 3% Irish, so that means I have to have some Irish in me too. So anyway, it's really great for the businesses from that standpoint. It's, I think it was an unintended consequence 22 years ago when this was started. Finally, I also want to thank Governor Rauner. For whatever reason, this seems to be a favorite parade of his. He always stays much longer than his staff wants him to stay. He did that again this year, and is always very personal, very approachable, and probably takes a couple hundred pictures with Elmhurst residents during his stay here. So I want to thank him for joining in the St. Patrick's Day spirit. That's it for me, City Manager Grabowski.
Thank you. One item, and in Alderman Dunn's absence, I'll give an update on the ONCC meeting that both of us attended last Friday. The ONCC membership grew by 4 members. 2 of them, the Village of Glenview and Salt Creek School District 48, were requests of the City of Elmhurst to join. 2 others, Wooddale School District 7 and Bensonville School District 2, joined as well. The staff from the staff from CDA reported on the interim fly quiet plan submittal to FAA. That has been submitted, and so they are working with the FAA on everything that they need for that review to happen. The FAA has not given them a definite timeline of when that review will be completed. And for everyone's information here, the next meeting, which is April 13th, and is a public meeting, the CDA is scheduled to provide an overview of the expansion project. I know that was asked about at our last council meeting. So once that happens, on April 13th, we'll be able to bring more information back to the City Council. And then last, the commission voted to change the bylaws and make Fly Quiet a standing committee. That has been an ad hoc committee, and Mayor Morley has requested twice to the chairman for Elmhurst to have a seat on that committee. She is going to be reviewing that with committee members, the executive board, to appoint those 11 members. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other reports? Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question in regards to or 2 questions on the O'Hare report. Just one being, any info on the construction schedule tied to it? And then the other, are all the questions from the FAA meeting that we held here at the council received from the parties, being the FAA, and I don't know if ONCC was there or not anymore, but.
I know we got a letter at the end of February from the FAA, which I think covered everything in that meeting.
Correct.
I don't know about the construction schedule. Any word on that?
They do not have that schedule done yet for the construction. I talked to Mr. Frame beforehand, and he said they're not sure when they'll have that together.
Thank you.
Any other reports? Seeing none, we'll go on to ordinances. 9.1. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to read the ordinance.
An ordinance waiving bid and authorizing the execution of a rider to a commercial alarm agreement for a wireless radio network upgrade.
Okay, to put this before council, pardon me, I'll ask for a motion to approve the ordinance as read. Motion by Alderman Levin, second by Alderman Palomsky. Alderman Levin?
Thank you. This is our wireless alarm system that we have in Elmhurst that ties in, currently ties into DUCOM. It's new technology, and this is the cost to upgrade to stay in step with that technology, as all the other municipalities will be doing.
Okay, comments or questions? Clerk Spencer.
Palomsky.
Aye.
Bram.
Aye.
Toledo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Onquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner. Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino, absent. Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn, absent. Leader.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Agenda item 9.1 is approved. On to 9.2. Clerk Spencer, I ask you to read the ordinance.
An ordinance expressing official intent regarding the use of special tax allocation fund for the tax increment financing district, commonly described as the Central Business District Redevelopment Project Area.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the ordinance as read. Motion by Alderman Honquist, second by Alderman Toledo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, before we continue with this conversation with council, a couple things as chair I want to make note of. First of all, the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ordinances have to do with the downtown TIF, de-tiffing, re-tiffing, et cetera. So that being the case, although we'll try to handle them in the order that they are, there's a lot of overlap in conversation and discussion. So I'm going to allow leeway in that sense, so that if you're addressing agenda item 9.2 and some of your conversation bleeds into 9.3, that's fine. It's a complicated issue, and to try to parse it out separately in conversation would be difficult. So that's 1. 2, just a real quick comment on 9.2, which is the one that's currently before us. And the reason why I will provide additional texture is that this has to do with TIF 4. So right now, TIF 1 abuts TIF 4, kind of up there by Hamburger Heaven and Elmhurst 255. And when we structured TIF 4, we entered into an intergovernmental agreement with the parks and the schools. And it's a complicated agreement, and it's a whole bunch of stuff in it. However, one of the points that affects what we're doing here tonight is the idea of porting money. The TIF law in the state of Illinois allows for governments to move money from one TIF to another TIF under certain circumstances. In this case, we do have 2 TIFs that abut each other, and this is allowed to happen. But with our IGA with the parks and the schools, we have to get their permission to port. And at the time we created TIF 4, and at the time we signed the TIF 4 IGA, the intent was to allow a porting access. The city at the time, and still does not have any intention of porting for its own gain. In this case, this ordinance is for porting of funds out of TIF 1 into TIF 4 for the sole use by either the parks or the schools up there. What this really does is create flexibility as we move forward with this TIF to potentially shift some of the funds that are in our downtown TIF and shift them up to TIF 4 for the sole purpose of use either by parks or schools. Technically, the schools have 2 properties within TIF 4. I know they have some, I guess, ongoing capital projects or needs up there. So this affords them the opportunity to use some of those funds that would be ported. Parks technically don't have a park in TIF 4, but they do have one adjacent to TIF 4, and an argument can be made that funds could possibly be used to enhance that park, which would benefit TIF 4. The reason why, and then the final thing as it relates to porting, you can only port when the TIF is in existence. So that is why this is the first ordinance out of 5 that we're considering. This really is a conditional port, if you will, or a conditional ordinance. This allows us to do this. This allows us to set that money aside. Council's aware that we are in conversation with certainly the schools on a whole bunch of issues. And I know that City Manager Grabowski talked to Superintendent Dave Moyer, letting him know that the opportunity was, we're going to legislatively make it okay to port, but we wouldn't do it without their permission. So school district is aware that the porting option is out there for them. We expect to hear from them shortly as it relates to this specific thing. If ultimately we don't port, the money can remain in the TIF or remain tied to the original TIF, and a couple of things can happen. Council can decide to declare a surplus, in which case all taxing bodies get their percentage, or the council could decide to spend that money on TIF expenses. All this does is keep the option open to potentially provide additional funds to schools and parks. So, with that having been said, I hope it didn't complicate matters too much for you, Mr. Honquist.
I think you took care of it all.
Yeah. I've got them lulled right now. So the first ordinance is about the porting, which technically happens before the TIF ends. But beyond that, I will turn this over to Alderman Honquist. Thank you. And refrain from further comment. Just wanted to provide context. Mr. Honquist.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To previous discussion on this topic, I just wanted to highlight why are we doing the TIF, and for anyone that is opposed to the TIF, supply some rationale behind it. I think everyone on the dais understands that. I'd go back 20 plus years ago when some of these TIFs were originally put into place, that the strategy and therefore the policies concerning the TIFs were a very smart and effective way to take Elmhurst into the future, and we're seeing the benefits of that today with our downtown and with our entire city. In particular, for anyone that's watching the business world and the news, I think in the last few days, Toys R Us has filed for bankruptcy, and Claire's today also filed for bankruptcies. And as we all know, Whole Foods is now owned by Amazon, which, if the way things are going, the whole world may soon be owned by Amazon. But it highlights the fact that we are in a very changing, very dynamic marketplace right now, probably one more so than any of us have seen in our lifetime, maybe that our economy has seen. And we have to look at these factors and be strategic in what we do and how we move forward. And the TIF's one of those tools that we have that we can leverage to help with development. And I think the benefits of what we've done in the past and the decisions that have been made here are bearing tremendous fruit for us here in Elmhurst. And I think one of my colleagues said the last time we discussed this, if you look at what's going on in Oak Brook, they're either following us or validating us with how they are changing the malls there to be more experiential, and there's a lot more restaurants and things to do there. So I think this follows in the same kind of philosophical track that a lot of communities are looking at, which is we're going to have to be aggressive as we continue to go forward, maybe even more aggressive than we think we should be, and I think that's a good thing. So I ask for everyone's support on this, and I'm going to kind of read through, as the mayor already laid out, the different ordinances, particularly the first one. I'll move through part of that, but real quick, over the last several months, the city has been completing the steps necessary in terminating the current Central Business District TIF, which is TIF 1, and establishing a new downtown TIF district. These 5 ordinances that the mayor laid out deal with that process. As part of the process in establishing the new downtown TIF, A joint review board meeting was held on January 24th to review the plan and the project of this new TIF and to determine if the new TIF met the eligibility criteria. The JRB approved the recommendation of the City Council that the new TIF met the eligibility criteria by a vote of 5-1, with District 205 being the only dissenter. The city firmly believes that the new downtown TIF meets the eligibility criteria, and there are no legal issues with terminating TIF 1 and establishing the downtown TIF. However, based on the school district's concerns regarding financial impacts and considerations, the city and school district have been meeting to review those interests, which the mayor outlined, and the city and school staff will continue to do so until there is an agreement for the downtown TIF. So now on to the 5 pieces of legislation. The first one, the mayor covered. I don't think I need to review that. Just to say this is kind of a conditional TIF. If we need it, it is there, and we've got to pass it at this time. The second ordinance deals with terminating TIF 1. This step needs to happen before the creation of the downtown TIF to comply with TIF law. Property cannot reside in 2 or more TIFs at the same time. The third ordinance for consideration approves the redevelopment plan and project for the downtown tax increment financing district. This ordinance is the first of 3 ordinances which must be adopted by the City Council in order to establish the downtown tax increment financing district. The fourth ordinance designates the boundaries of the downtown tax increment financing district. This ordinance is the second of 3 ordinances which must be adopted by the City Council in order to establish the downtown tax increment financing district. And finally, the 5th ordinance adopts tax increment allocation financing for the downtown tax increment financing district. This ordinance is the third of the 3 ordinances which I outlined, which must be adopted by the City Council in order to establish the downtown tax increment financing district. And yes, I will be getting readers soon. That concludes my remarks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, questions or comments? Alderman Levin.
I just would like to add to the fine report that one of the reasons we do involve the schools and the park districts is because I think Elmhurst, more than many, if not all their communities, has entered into agreements where we have helped out by providing funds for purposes other than that for which a TIF is intended, which is development, and we have entered into agreements that help take care of these other taxing districts to address needs they have and any short-term shortfall that they might feel they're going to suffer in tax funding. So TIF 4 is one such creature.
Okay, additional comments? All right, well, let's vote. Alderman Deuter.
This pertains more to the latter ordinances, but I'll make my comments now. I agree with Alderman Honquist that this is a tool, and I think it's an important tool for us to use. We have access to it, we meet the criteria, and I think it would be short-sighted of us to not create it and be in a position to utilize it. I think the key for whether or not it is a net gain to the community is in how we use it. And I think we need to be mindful that just because we have it doesn't mean every development should receive it. So that's just a comment about how I think we should be using this TIF going forward. I think we should use it very judiciously and make sure that we're using it only in cases that we're receiving something through the development that the market would not otherwise provide. So I support the creation of it. I think we've used it well in the past, and I hope that's what we continue to see.
Any other questions or comments? Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to call the roll on agenda item 9.2.
Polumsky.
Aye.
Bram.
Aye.
Toledo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino, absent. Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn, absent. Leader.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. 9.2 is approved. On to 9.3. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to read the ordinance.
An ordinance terminating the designation of the City of Elmhurst Central Business District Redevelopment Project Area as amended as created by the City of Elmhurst as a tax increment financing redevelopment project area and dissolving the special tax increment allocation fund for said redevelopment project area.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the ordinance as read. Motion by Alderman Honquist, second by Alderman Toledo. Comments? Clerk Spencer.
Palumski.
Aye.
Bram.
Aye.
Toledo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino, absent. Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn, absent. Leader.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Agenda item 9.3 is approved. On to agenda item 9.4. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to read the ordinance.
An ordinance of the City of Elmhurst, DuPage, in Cook Counties, Illinois, approving a tax increment redevelopment plan and redevelopment project for the downtown redevelopment project area.
With this ordinance before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the ordinance as read. Motion by Alderman Honquist, second by Alderman Toledo. Any comment? Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say and reiterate what I said in the past when this was a report is I can't support this. I talked about an intergovernmental agreement. I know there's been conversations along those lines, you know, for and against. I'm not sure where it'll end up. I was for the other two ordinances, well, mainly the first ordinance that we just voted on, due to the fact of giving the ability to assisting the other governmental bodies as needed. The next three I am not for, or otherwise I am against. You know, I agree that it's a tool, and it's a great tool, and it's helped us over the last approximately, 34 years. But as I said when we spoke about the report, when is enough enough? And another 23 years on top of the approximate 34 years is a long duration. I don't know if we need to continue that. Obviously, some of my colleagues have already stated that they feel that it is necessary, but 34, 35 years of one area being a TIF district is significant, and I think we need to allow the marketplace to take effect.
Okay, any additional comments? Alderman Mulliner.
I'm wholeheartedly in support of this. What I want to make sure that everybody knows, and I know most of the people on the council know, but I think everyone else needs to just be aware of the fact that one of the things that the city has a responsibility for is to continue to grow our development and grow our tax base, our property tax base. And one of the reasons why it's so important that we grow that tax base is because of the fact that the other two main taxing bodies in the city of Elmhurst rely on that tax base. They rely on the property taxes in order to survive. They have no tools available to them to assist them to increase that tax base. We're the only ones with that capability to increase that tax base, especially in a landlocked community. And it's one of the reasons why when we put this particular TIF together, we were very careful on making sure that we also, in addition to took an area that we felt has a lot of opportunity for additional development, we also included in it the school district, one of the school district offices, we included one of the schools, we included one of our major parks, and we included some property that the park district purchased. And the reason why we did that was to give us the flexibility, if they have capital projects in any of those particular sites, we have the ability with the TIF law to be able to fund and assist with some of those capital projects. Therefore, we're here trying to help as much as we can all of those taxing bodies, in particular the two main taxing bodies that we have in the city, and we're the place that can make it happen. We're the place that can make a difference when it comes to economic development. Unfortunately, they don't have the tools to do that. We do.
Any additional comments? Alderman York.
Thank you. Just to kind of add on to some points, some really great points that Alderman Mulliner made. I think it's dangerous to consider that the TIF that we're proposing now is exactly the same as the TIF that we're that we have eliminated, in the fact that if you go back to when the TIF was originated, there were many more properties in it, and many properties have been released over the course of TIF 1, and then there's also been a size reduction with the new downtown TIF. So yes, we will have had a TIF in a particular area for a given amount of years, but it certainly is much different in scope than it was at the beginning. So I think that's important. The other thing, too, that I'll just take the time right now to stress is that I think we all agree that downtown is pretty good. I think if we look back when it first started, it wasn't pretty good. If we just stop now, take our foot off the gas and coast for a while, unless you're going downhill, coasting doesn't end in a good result. It always ends up in things stopping. So I again, pretty much singing the same tune that I've sung all along, in that we can't not make investments in our downtown. It's our central economic engine. As Alderman Molnar pointed out, it drives much of the EAV increases across the entire city, not just in the area that it's located in. So I think that's a very valid point. And again, the other thing too is I think we have a business community in the downtown TIF that invests in itself. They tax themselves to work with the city to provide the sensory experiences that are above and beyond what the city could do in a normal funding level. And these people are taxing themselves to make that investment. So we can't pull the plug and expect that those folks would necessarily go along with making that same investment on an ongoing basis. So those are my points for right now. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? All right, to remind council, we are voting on agenda item 9.4, 0-22-2018. Any other comments? Clerk Spencer.
Palumski.
Aye.
Bram.
No.
Toledo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino, absent. Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn, absent. Leader.
Aye.
12 ayes, 1 nays, 2 absent. Oh, 11. That's right. I wrote 12 here by mistake. 11 ayes, 1 nays, 2 absent.
11 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries. Agenda item 9.14, or 9.4 is approved. On to agenda item 9.5. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to read the ordinance.
An ordinance of the City of Elmhurst, DuPage, and Cook Counties, Illinois, designating the downtown redevelopment project area of said city of redevelopment project area pursuant to the Tax Increment Allocation Redevelopment Act.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the ordinance as read. Motion by Alderman Honquist, second by Alderman Toledo. Any comments, questions? Clerk Spencer.
Palumski.
Aye.
Bram.
No.
Toledo.
Aye.
York.
Yes.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino, absent. Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn, absent. Leader.
Aye.
11 ayes, 1 nays, 2 absent.
11 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries. I've lost count. Was that 9.5?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Agenda item 9.5 is approved. On to agenda item 9.6. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to read the ordinance.
An ordinance of the City of Elmhurst, DuPage, and Cook Counties, Illinois, adopting tax increment allocation financing for the downtown redevelopment project area.
Okay, to put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the ordinance as read. Motion by Alderman Honquist, second by Alderman Toledo. Any comments? Clerk Spencer.
Palumski.
Aye.
Bram.
No.
Toledo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Oleander.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino, absent. Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn, absent. Leader.
Aye.
11 ayes, 1 nays, 2 absent.
11 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries. Agenda item 9.6 is approved. On to agenda item 9.7. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to read the ordinance.
An ordinance providing for the defeasance of $6,460,000 taxable sales tax refunding bonds, Series 2006A of the city, authorizing the execution and delivery of an escrow agreement in connection with same, authorizing the release of related loan documents and related matters.
To put this before council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the ordinance as read. Motion by Alderman York, second by Alderman Brennan. Alderman York, any comment?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Any comments or questions? Clerk Spencer.
Palumski.
Aye.
Bram.
Aye.
Toledo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Oleander.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Sabatino, absent. Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn, absent. Leader.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
12 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Agenda item 9.7 is approved. On to agenda item 10, 10.1, any other business? Being no other business, I will entertain a motion. Mike Honquest wants to.
How much higher do I have to go?
Other business. Alderman Honquest, you have something to say.
I have 4 items real quick. Number 1, World Down Syndrome Day is this Wednesday, March 21st, for all people that live or love people with Down syndrome. It's a great day. I just want to point that out. 2, I want to thank staff for organizing. I forgot to mention earlier, this was a lot of work to go through this tax. They did a nice job organizing and summarizing that, so thank you. 3rd, the rule of baseball. I coached and played too many years. It's a myth that there's a tie. The runner's either safe or out. So just like us, you have to make a decision, safe or out. And then finally, we do not have committee meeting next week. Thank you.
Fantastic. Any other business? Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to announce that Public Works and Buildings also will not be meeting on Monday.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alderman Levin.
Public Safety will not be meeting next week.
Okay.
Why is Tom making us work?
Appreciate your dedication, Alderman York. It extends to your full committee. Any other business? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Alderman Honquest, second by Alderman Mulliner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approved. We are adjourned. Thank you.